Hi, I'm Barbara O'Brien. I'm an animal trainer and photographer, and I'd like to welcome you to The Empathetic Trainer. Hello, I'm Barbara O'Brien, and you're listening to The Empathetic Trainer. Today's guest is Lynn Acton. Lynn Acton is an author, horse trainer, and certified riding instructor. Her book, What Horses Really Want Unlocking the Secrets to Trust, Cooperation, and Reliability, is a must read for any horse person who wants to do better for their horse. Lynn believes the key to a good relationship with your horse is putting yourself in their shoes to figure out what they need from you. Well, I couldn't agree more, Lynn, and we're really happy to have you here with us today. Thank you for being on our show.
It's my pleasure, Barbara.
Well, I'm a big fan. We start right there. I have your book. It's kind of beat up because I've read it
That's
more than
marvelous.
more than once, and so we're going to certainly talk about this. But I wish we had lots of time because all the great stuff that you have to share with us, I just think horses are going to be better for it, and so we're grateful that you put it in a book form, and that also people can follow you on social media and communicate with you and clinics and everything that you do. So we're grateful for that. So again, thanks for being here. Okay, so with horses, I love that a little bit of breed bias here, but you're Arabians. I just want to start with your Arabians because I've had Arabs and I love them. I was an Arab horse groupie back in the 80s when I was a teenager. I'd go to the Region 10 horse show at the St. Paul, the Hippodrome in St. Paul at the fairgrounds, and like walk around the barn and go, "Do you need help? Can I brush your horse? Can I do that?" And people took
Aw.
pity on me and would let me brush their beautiful show Arabians and work with them. And so really have a soft spot for them. So reading your book, because you talk about your Arabians a lot, was a joy because they don't tell anybody because I have all Morgans now, but I still think Arabs are like some of the smartest horses out there. So
I think there's a lot of similarities, nice similarities between Arabians and Morgans. And I have to tell you, the funny story behind this is before I got bronze, I said, I will never, ever have an Arabian. Everyone I've ever seen is a spooky airhead. I had that bias. And I was horse hunting and I looked for 2 years and I was not finding anything. And somebody finally said, "Oh, just go look at some Arabians. I know a good breeder. He has a lot of good horses." And I met Bronze and I watched his interaction with his breeder and I watched how athletic he was. And I thought, that is the horse I've been looking for all my life.
oh, that's
So, it
yeah.
never pays to have a breed bias. It's the individual horse.
Oh, that's really, really true. Although I'm kind of biased with my Morgans right now, but I've always had Morgans too. I like both breeds, equally well. Uh, just a side note, because we were talking about how wonderful Arabs are. I have four sons and many nieces, and back in the must have been 90s, when horses were quite expensive, like they are now. I had the girls who were teenagers, young teenagers, write letters to breeders saying, "Do you have a retired show horse that we can give a wonderful home for?" Because we couldn't afford to buy horses like what people needed for them at the time.
Mhm.
And so we ended up with quite a few dollar horses. I think we ended up with $4 or $5 horses. So my nieces rode and showed them in 4-H, and my sons had the pleasure of riding Arabs. And so we had a wonderful horse named St. Croix Ramallah, who was a region. I'm sorry, in the nationals, he was in the top 10 of Western Pleasure, and he was retired, to us, and we had him at the rest of his life. And you could not have asked for a better kid's horse. I mean, he was the kindest. Well, his name was, we called him Reno, and he was the kindest, best boy. And then I had a retired show mare. Mercedes loved her so much, a hard horse there. And then my other son, or we had another horse, Kijiba, who was also a national champion in his retirement. So they came with a lot of experience, but kind hearts. So they were great kids' horses.
I was going to say that is the best model for kids to grow up with. The boldest, bravest riders I know grew up riding horses that they trusted would take care of them. And that's just a great way to get a kid set up for confidence and skills.
Oh, it's really true. And now I have grandchildren, and they're getting to be, starting to get old enough to ride. And the best, most fun part though is my youngest grandson, who's 2, is decidedly horse crazy, and I'm just thrilled
Well,
because he comes out and he goes
well,
horse, and it's like we have to go horse.
yes,
So
that's
hopefully we
been my
catch one or
call
two.
when that's been my draw when my grandkids come visit is we have horse time, and
Exactly.
they
So
love
you're the
me very
cool grandma
much.
for sure, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start off with I want to talk about your book. I'm going to hold it up again. What horses really want, which we'll talk where people can find that as we get to the end. But there's a quote that you talk about when riding and training my horses, I was forever trying to put myself in the place of the animal and to think from his point of view. So how did that come about? So I'm going to start from when you were young and what your experience was like with horses when you were young. Like tell us the beginning. And did you always feel that way, or was there a shift? As you became more aware of horses and their feelings.
I always felt that way. As a young child, I was encouraged to be empathetic toward animals and think about their point of view. And then when I was old enough to read Colonel Podolsky's books and I
Ah,
saw that quote from him, I thought that really that sums it up. If you look at things from the horse's point of view, it makes everything so much easier because they have emotions, they have feelings, and if you understand what the feeling is behind their behavior, then you can get to the heart of what's going on, and then you can end up with a relationship where you have a horse who wants to be your cooperative partner rather than a situation where you're trying to drum obedience into him. So I always had a natural empathy for horses, and as a kid, and I think a lot of young women feel this way, I had the feeling that I sort of understood what they felt.
mm-hmm.
And a lot of us are taught then, well, but they don't have feelings, and that was really scientific view back in the 90s of, well, animals don't have feelings. It's all about instinct and conditioning. Well, as a kid, I knew they had feelings, and I tuned into them, and I think that really helped me get along with them better. So that is why I loved that quote from Colonel Podolsky: is if you think about things from the horse's point of view, but then you end up being cooperative partners instead of having this boss servant sort of um, relationship.
Oh,
So yeah,
absolutely.
and,
I have the book. I have a couple of his books, so I know what you're talking about. That's pretty cool. Let's start. How did you get into horses? Did you get? Were you lucky enough to grow up with them, or?
yes and no. I was horse crazy from the time I knew what a horse was, like so many of us. Um, and the only option I could find for riding as a kid was a horse dealer, an elderly horse dealer who let kids ride horses in return for doing barn chores.
Mm-hmm.
And so it meant I rode whatever horses were there. I got very little instruction, just what some of the older girls told me. So very much I had to figure out for myself by coordinating with the horses and by reading whatever I could find. And bless the librarians, my school and community libraries had the best books
Mm-hmm.
on nonfiction books on horses, and especially Margaret Cable Self, who was
Oh,
the great horse writer of. Yep.
you're speaking my language. I have several of her books too, treasures
Yes.
and yeah,
Yes,
for
and
sure.
her horsemanship was like my reference, and so I learned a lot from reading, and then I just tried it out on the horses, and I got to ride a lot of different horses. So that was a very different education than kids get these days, where most of their riding is supervised.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was completely unsupervised, and I did some amazingly stupid things, and
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
much credit the horses for the fact that I'm still here.
Yeah, no, I had an elderly woman that had a farm and I exchanged riding, not even riding lessons, just the opportunity to ride for chores.
Hmm.
And we were just like every Saturday we do morning, we do chores in the morning and we get to ride all afternoon. And like she didn't even come outside. We just like we were able to just go and do, and of course we learned how to ride bareback, and we probably weren't as thoughtful of those horses as we could have been looking back as a teenager, but they would let us know if we'd gone too far. If we were going too much, they'd stop dead. We'd go flying off. And you learn like, okay, maybe you're not thrilled with, cantering this much. So we learned like, okay, we should be a little more sensitive about your feelings. So yeah, exactly. I do feel like we were kind of lucky in a way because we certainly got a lot of confidence, and, we're able to be very confident riders. So that part was a good thing. But
Okay.
and no helmets, nothing like that. I'm really grateful
Oh,
for things like helmets
yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody wore helmets in those days.
No, but I'm grateful because I did have a serious fall on an Arabian mare. Not her fault at all. She was telling me no, really. I've had her way over threshold. This is before I knew what I know now. I'm trying to get smarter every day about things, and got bucked off. I was riding bareback with a halter and got bucked off and broke my pelvis in 3 spots. But I'm long recovered. This was back in 2020. But the helmet is what protected me from like really having a serious concussion because I know I landed hard on my head. So
Oh yeah, well, I had quite a few concussions, I suspect, as a kid,
right.
and decided I really don't need any more.
Yeah,
So,
so we are in agreement. We are pro helmet. Pro helmet.
absolutely, oh yeah,
Everybody wear your helmet. Okay.
yeah.
All right. So I'd like to talk to you about kind of the theme of your book, which is protector leadership. Do you want to kind of run through that a little bit for people that may not, a lot of our audience is going to be new to horses or have horses but new ways of thinking about horses, because I feel there is a real shift going on about dogs and cats and horses, and dogs have been there for a while, but the shift in how we're thinking about horses, where we are understanding that of course they have feelings and of course they're going to act like horses, and the more we know about that the better. So maybe you can run us through that a little bit.
Well, it the difference is that traditionally horse training has been focused, and especially with the introduction of natural horsemanship, very much focused on what we want horses to do for us and how we can make them do what we want. How do we get them to perform better? How do we get them to behave better? How do we get them to stop spooking? And it's all about what they do. It's about moving the feet and controlling the behavior. And it completely ignores that all behavior is prompted by emotions. Emotions are there to help a species survive, so they control the behavior. And if we look more at the emotions behind the behavior, then we can elicit cooperation and even devotion from horses who really want, what they really want is to feel safe. And I discovered this. Well, I think most of us kind of intuitively know this, and in spite of some of the training techniques many of us were taught, I think a lot of people, especially women, tend to be more empathetic and nurturing. And so, in spite of the techniques we're taught, a lot of us have attempted to make that emotional connection with a horse that helps a horse feel safe. But nobody that I could find in any of the books that I read really looked at it directly from the point of view of let's look at the emotions and meet the horse's emotional need and make that the integral part of our relationship, our handling, and our training. And what pushed me way into doing this, because I was kind of working around the edges of it. I got a foster pony. I told the rescue, I'll train him so he can be more, train him for riding so he can be more adoptable. And he came and they said he was, oh, good old boy. We pony kids off of him and do all kinds of stuff. He was anxious, and anxious horses are not safe horses. So I tried what I thought was a really radical experiment. Said, you look at him cross-eyed, and he's like, oh no, what did I do wrong? So I tried what I thought was a really radical experiment. I said, I'm going to use as much positive reinforcement as I know. I'm going to cut back. And, well, the results really stunned me. He kept meeting me at the pasture gate every day, like, oh, hi, I'm glad to see you. And there was no regression. I thought horses were always supposed to regress when you were training. There was no regression. There was no resistance. I did some click and treat with him, but after a while, he didn't even bother looking for the treats. I'd click to say, hey, you did that exactly right. And he's like, oh, good. What do we do next?
Oh, yes, for sure.
And it actually was like, I'm waiting for this guy to blow up because this is just too good to be true. Way too good to be true. So something's got to go wrong, right? And I was actually nervous about riding him for a while, but nothing went wrong. Mm-hmm. And after 8 months, the first prospective adopters came to meet him. They adopted him, and off he went. And they said, well, something really interesting happened here. Mm-hmm. But was it just him? Did I just have Pony Einstein, who was just like so smart He got everything figured out. I gotta find out. So I called the rescue and I said, I want a tougher pony to train next time. She
Hmm.
said, oh, I know just the pony for you. So I went to meet her, and the nice lady at the rescue turned Brandy loose in their big arena so we could meet her, and then she couldn't catch her. This is the
Hmm.
lady who fed and cared for this pony for 3 years, and the mere presence of my husband and myself as strangers had Brandy so terrified that she wouldn't even let her familiar person catch her.
Hmm.
I said, okay, there's something more to this than what I thought. So um, when she got, I could see she was getting frustrated and embarrassed. And I said, how about if I see what I can do? Because
Hmm.
catching horses is kind of a specialty of mine. Because I don't catch them, I let them catch me.
That's there you go right there. Before let's explain that because that is so true. I don't catch them. I let them catch me. I that is a really great principle. If you could just go into that, we'll continue the story about Brandy, but how does that work? Because everybody, a lot of people have trouble with their horse catching the horses
Um,
or being caught.
it's I tell them that I'm not going to pressure you. So I stand very quiet, put my head down, just sort of look relaxed and slouchy. And after a while, running around and around, she started looking at me like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you're not chasing me. You're not trying to catch me. And when she looked at me, I backed up a step.
Aha.
And that said to her, I'm not going to pressure you. I saw you look at me and ask me to back up. So I did. And every time she looked at me, I backed up a step. And then after a while, she started to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And I backed up another step. Every time she did what I was hoping for, the looking at me and the slowing down, I backed up a step.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, she slowed down and she started watching me like, well, you're kind of a strange person. People don't usually do what you're doing.
Exactly.
Uh, and after I was 15 or 20 minutes, she just walked over to me. I didn't touch her right away because
Mm-hmm.
that would have been pressure again and spooked her away. So I just stood there and let her stand in front of me. And then I kind of turned carefully and stood next to her. So she and I were facing the same way, reached up, scratched her neck.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't go away, but I figured that was enough. Said, okay, I'm done. And I walked back to the gate where my husband was standing with the director of the rescue,
Mm-hmm.
and Brandy followed me.
Yes.
And I thought, this is interesting. She's really connected. And for the next half hour, we talked about plans and what to do about Brandy. And for the entire time, she stood there next to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I don't know what to do with this because if you just look at this horse, it's pressure. How do I train with no pressure? How do I even
Right.
handle the horse with no pressure? I'd gone with the first foster pony, I'd reduced it, but this time I had to use none.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I really didn't know what I was going to do with her, but she was still standing there next to me, looking calm. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, I can't just leave her. I have to try. I can't leave her.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, yep, this was fall. I said, yep, bring her to us in the spring. And I had all winter to go, okay, what the heck am I going to do now? So, so I pulled together all of my background with horsemanship, which it was very varied. I grew up riding hunt seat. I've ridden Western. I've done classical dressage. That's dressage for the horses, not the
Mm-hmm.
ribbons. I've done musical freestyle. And um, so I've learned things from all those different places. And then I have an academic background in sociology and system science. So I kind of pulled that together, my horsemanship
Mm-hmm.
information and background and research, and sort of looking, what did other people do when faced with a horse like this? Kim Walms talked a lot
Yeah.
about Grey Goose and how he was a problem for everybody, and even for her at first, and what she did to work with him. And Frederick Pignon of Cavalier talked about Templado, his very difficult, who ended up being one of the
Mm-hmm.
stars of his show. And so I got a lot
Sure.
of philosophy, and everybody could explain the philosophy of you just don't put pressure on the horse. Well, yeah, but then what do you do with them? And nobody was explaining, how do
Yeah.
I implement this? Like, yeah, I'm all on board with the philosophy, but how do I go about doing it? And then I got really lucky. When we delivered our first foster pony to his new home, there was another pony there who was absolutely petrified of people. I mean, so petrified that when we
Hmm.
looked at her over her stall door, she plastered herself to the wall in terror. A couple months
Oh,
later, I heard
yeah.
that a young trainer was working with her and doing really well. I said, I got to see this. So he graciously gave me
Hmm.
a demonstration. He walked up to the pony's stall door and stood sideways to the pony, not facing her, but sideways, and just held the halter.
Hmm.
And after about 5 minutes, she came over and let him put the halter on her head. He said the first time it took him half an hour, just standing there waiting.
Hmm.
And then with the halter on her, he walked out the door, down the barn aisle, across the driveway, into the indoor arena, and she was plastered to his side like an obedience dog at heel. And the lead line never went tight. When he got her in the indoor, he took the lead line off, and she continued to follow him everywhere. And I'm thinking, well, how did he teach her to do this? He didn't. It was all in his body language. He made himself a safe place to be by not pressuring her. He didn't approach her. He let her approach him. And so he became a safe haven for her. And um, after a while, he took the lead line off. She kept following him. And then all of a sudden, she left, zoomed off around the arena, ran around a little bit, started playing with poles and poking her nose into this, that, and the other thing. And I thought, okay, he's going to be embarrassed if this lapsed, right? So I said to him, so what do you do now? He says, nothing. She'll be back. Like, okay. Well, pretty soon, she poked her nose into something. It fell over. She scared herself. She ran back and she plastered herself to his side, just like a foal runs back to mama and plasters himself to her side when she's scared. Here's my safety net. That's when the light bulb went on in my head. He gave her the choice to leave. She never felt trapped. She never felt pressured. Then I had a clue where to start with Brandy. And that's exactly how it worked. When Brandy came, I'd turn her out in my arena because I thought, well, if I turn her out in my 3-acre pasture, I might not catch her for a while. This grass would look good. So I put her in the arena, and then I would go and work in the arena. I'd pull weeds or rearrange equipment, and she'd watch me. And then she'd leave off grazing. And the next thing I knew, and this was only a couple of days, she had her nose in the middle of whatever I was doing. I'm pulling weeds, and she's like, hey, can I help you with that? Moving equipment. Like, can I check this out with you? And so she wanted to be with me. She started following me around.
And this was because there was no pressure. And you're not asking her to do anything at this point. You're just building a relationship by not using pressure.
Exactly. What horses really want is to feel safe. And a horse who has been traumatized has learned that people are not safe. And that had been Brandy's experience. She was found wandering loose, feral, here in upstate New York, where we're not supposed to have feral horses. And so she had to be trapped and herded onto a trailer to be taken to the rescue. So there's trauma. And then she went to a dominance-oriented trainer for 30 days training. And I suspect that pretty much did her in because he was the one who delivered her to us. And she was absolutely petrified of him. So we had that to overcome. So she needed some time to be satisfied that people might be safe. But I was lucky she decided pretty quickly that I was safe. And then that began to extend to other people.
I was going to ask you about that if it extended. Yeah.
And I don't know what makes the difference because some horses will find somebody they feel safe with and that's it. And maybe it's just because the other people around them don't give off safe vibes. But once Brandy got to know different people here, I was the main person who handled her. And my husband would come in the barn and engage with her, but he was a dog person before he was a horse person. So his whole approach to animals is just this very friendly, hey, would you like some scratching and some petting?
Yeah.
And he chat.
That's my husband as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great for making a nice connection with the horse. So from Brandy's point of view, it's like, okay, it looks like everybody here's safe, and kind of by a natural selection process. Anybody who comes to our farm likes animals, so I think that vibe goes over to the horses.
All right, so getting back to Brandy, after a few days of no pressure, just letting her be while you did your chores and things like that, you found out that she would be curious and start following you around. And that was because want to be with you. And that was because you weren't asking anything of her at that point.
I was showing her that I wasn't going to pressure her, and that made me a safe person, safe place to be. And that's really what horses want. And she showed that the very first day that I met her at the rescue farm, when she was willing to come over to me and follow me to the gate and wait there with me. So sometimes you see that with the horse immediately. Other times it can take a while, especially if horses have known a lot of people that were not trustworthy, and they've just sort of decided that basically the human race is best avoided. And so then it can take longer. If you have a horse that's interesting, and the horse might go investigate it, and that sort of triggers curiosity, which is a positive feeling. And if you're associated with something positive like that, then that's points in your favor. Or you go investigate something new. Maybe there's treats involved too, or little bits of choice hay or something, and then the horse gets curious. So if you have a horse who's just plain avoiding people, now Brandy clearly wanted to find somebody to trust, and she said, "Lynn, you're it." Um, but other horses will just plain avoid, and in that case, you need to make yourself interesting or engage in something interesting that arouses their curiosity. And if you're associated with curiosity and being able to investigate things and maybe discover fun treats or a toy to play with, then that makes you become an appealing person to be with.
It's very effective. Because we are mammals the same as horses and other animals. It's as an animal actor trainer, which is my main job. It's very, very true because sheep respond the same way as a horse would. Like if you run up to a flock of sheep that do not know you, of course they're going to scatter, right? Because you're a threat. You're taller. You're a human. They don't know you. But if you go in and you stand and you wait and you're quiet, I find that the sheep are
Sure.
curious and they're going to come. They're going to come slowly as long as you're not making threatening moves, as because you are so interesting. And you find that with cattle. I mean, cattle are dangerous to the point of curiosity, because I've learned a herd of cattle can be very curious and then they'll push to get into you
Mm-hmm.
because they really want to know you're there. So you got to be careful with cattle. And then children, if you are quiet and respectful and interesting, instead of going like baby, children will come around because now they're like, and very interesting. And of course, we all know this about cats. If you do not pressure a cat and glom onto a cat, he's going to come to you. And that's why people who go, I don't like cats. Why is that cat coming
Exactly.
here? Because
Yeah.
you are so interesting, giving off that vibe. Yeah, so it's very, very true. I was going to talk a little bit just quickly about the three Mustang. I keep calling them Mustangs because they were on the range, but they were my Morgans that I got from Westwind Morgans out in Montana, who lived on the range. Um, the two yearlings were super people oriented, even though they hadn't been handled much. They've been well cared for. Just they were raised, in a herd on the range. They super friendly, like right there, always wonderful. But the one that came as a 4-year-old, it had a lot more time being more worried about everything around her and her environment and not having a lot of human contact. And it took several weeks of just quiet, exactly what you're talking about, quiet curiosity until she would, come and put her head in a halter on her own will. And it's taken months, a whole season, because I've had her a little over a year now, to work with such quiet presence, so that she's starting to trust me. And it just takes time. But I feel like as we go through this process, this horse will climb a tree for me. Like we are in such tune with each other because I don't push her. I don't pressure her. I let her decide that what she wants to be with me and work on things together. And it's so gratifying because I was going to send her back in the beginning. I was like, she's so anxious, so anxious. And after getting hurt on that prior horse, I like didn't want to get hurt again, and I can't trust her. Da, da, da. But now that we're building all this, it's so gratifying. So I understand how you felt about Brandy when it finally did click. How gratifying that must have felt. And we can talk some more about that.
Well,
So then what
I
happened next
started
with Brandy?
using my body language. Well, I was already using my body language, of course, right from the start. But then I started asking her to walk with me, and using synchronization or copying, which is something that young horses will play with themselves, and fillies in particular play games of like, let's move in step. And so when I walked, and because I had to lead her to and from the barn for daily turnout and everything, but um, I
Sure.
would make sure that we were walking in step so that we were matching steps. And if I speeded up, she'd speed up. If I slowed down, she'd slow down. And so I could lead her with a loose lead. And there was no pressure. Now, you might say that asking her to move with me was some sort of pressure, but it was something that she was comfortable with. And so that was how a lot of her ground training went. Was I never used pressure on a halter or lead. I used my body language to say, let's go here, let's go there. And I would signal turns, and I would use my voice for walk, trot, halt, back up. So she was learning those by association, but she was mostly learning them, what I wanted, by watching my body language. And she's very subtle. If I wanted her to back up, um, I would just lean my body back a little bit. She's like, oh, okay, we're going backwards now, and turn my shoulders. She's like, oh, okay, we're going to go this way. We're going to go that way. Um, so she naturally, yeah, we were kind of naturally coordinating.
Hmm. Well, horses are wired to read body language, obviously. I
That's
mean,
right.
because otherwise they'd
Right.
run into each other in the herd. Like when they're running, they run into each other, so they have to know that space. And horses are really, as you know, of course, horses are very subtle with just the tilt of a head, an ear, to tell another horse back
Mhm.
off, or no, you're welcome to come play with me, or anything that they're trying to communicate. And so, of course, our favorite heart horses, the ones that we love the most, are the ones that read us the best, even if we didn't know what we were doing. But they were so accommodating, and just a shift of a hip bone, we would turn, like they would turn before you think turn, because they're so in tune with you. And what a great relationship. And they had
Yeah.
horses like that before I knew what was going on. I was really blessed that way to have those. Of course, it wasn't
I
Arabian, but
think
yeah.
they do tend to be pretty subtle. Um, I think most people don't realize how much
Yeah.
most of us use body language that's very much at odds with what horses are interpreting it as. Like, horses are so subtle. I had taught Brandy as we moved along,
Hmm.
and I started using more hand signals and voice commands. I taught Brandy to back up if I tapped the air with my finger, and that was working while she was beside me.
Hmm.
And then when she was in front of me, she wasn't backing up. No matter what I did, she wasn't backing up. And I finally realized I forgot to lean back. The finger didn't mean a whole lot, but my body had to be in the right position. And the thing about this is that we don't get to decide what the right answer is. And this was where making this shift for me was a huge, huge leap of faith, because you can't say this horse has disobeyed me. When you're using body language, you need to think in terms of, that's how she interpreted what I did. So when I stood there and tapped the air with my finger and she didn't back up, she wasn't being disobedient. She was doing exactly what she understood I said, which was nothing. When I leaned back, then she understood.
Hmm.
So for me, this was a whole process of discovery. And I would have to say, okay, I did this and Brandy did that, not the thing that I thought I was telling her to do. So, okay, so that's how I say that. It's like going to a foreign country. You don't tell them how they're going to speak their language. You have to figure out how to speak in the way that they
Right.
understand you. And that was the process I was going through with Brandy. And she's so subtle that horses see all kinds of things that we don't realize we're doing. And then we also need to interpret the body language that they use um, in terms of the emotions behind it. We went for a walk one day. I was taking Brandy up the driveway. We were just going to take a little walk down the road. Well, the recycle bin had been spilled. I think raccoons partied that night or something, and there's stuff all over the place. And from the bottom of the driveway, Brandy could just see this mess up there. And she didn't want to go, but she didn't turn to pull me back to the barn. She body blocked me, and I couldn't get around her to go up the driveway and show her, look, this is really okay, honey. Instead, she had me body blocked. I couldn't go up there. So fortunately, I saw my husband. I called to my husband. I said, told him what was going on. I said, can you go up to the recycle bin and show Brandy that this is safe? And she watched and she watched and she let me go first. And eventually we got to the top of the driveway, and then I started picking things up and putting them back in the recycle bin, and she had her nose in the middle of it. It's like, oh, let me inspect this thing. Let me inspect that thing. But the thing about her body blocking me is that she was in my space. She was pressed against my body. And a lot of people would have said, oh, no, she's in your space. She's trying to dominate you. She's trying to tell you what to do. She was trying to keep me safe. Lynn, something's not right up there. We should not be going up there, and I don't want you getting hurt either. So you stay down here where we know it's safe. So we need to really be careful about the interpretations. A lot of people have been programmed to interpret based on dominance theory, which says horses want to be dominant, so they're always trying to tell you what to do, and if you give them half an inch, they'll take a mile. And that's not what's going on. Horses we were talking about emotions earlier, and different mammals reacting similarly to horses. Well, all mammals share the same 7 core emotions. That is like a whole podcast in itself, and it's a topic I'm finding absolutely fascinating. And anybody who wants to pursue this, 2 great resources are watch Rachel Bedingfield's videos on the 7 core emotions, or sign up for one of Carolina Westland's online courses. She has a couple of great free short courses on animal emotions. And when you start understanding what's going on with them emotionally, it explains so much behavior, and it shows that they really do only want to have cooperative relationships with people. Because horse herds, unlike that big myth, horse herds do not survive on a dominance hierarchy. They survive by cooperation.
Right.
And everybody looks out for everybody. The adults are responsible for the kids. Everyone looks out for each other. And so once they connect with us, they look out for us. And I've heard some incredible stories of horses looking out for their people, even when it meant the horse putting herself in danger.
Right. Do you remember the story about in Canada, I believe it was in Canada, in the mountains, a woman was leading a trial ride of tourists, and a grizzly came out of nowhere and was charging the boy on a horse, and her horse, like, I think if I remember the story right, just leapt in between and knocked the grizzly over, if I remember, like ran into the grizzly. Totally not what horses would do, but to protect the other horses and the tourists and the girl riding. Like she drove the horse, was a big gelding, drove the grizzly away, completely against what horses do around bears. I mean, normally they're going to be like, we're gone.
But that's the protective instinct. So that's why I ended up calling our role being a protector leader, because when we show the horse that they're safe with us, that sets up that mutual social bond that horses have in a natural herd. And once they feel that bond, then this protection becomes reciprocal. I protect my horses, they protect me. And This has become Brandy's role in our herd. She's the self-appointed protector in the herd. And if she thinks something is wrong, she lets me know. She saw my grandson one time laying face down in the snow. Well, he's from Virginia. Snow is a great novelty. He was having fun. She didn't know that. She just saw his inert body face down. She ran around the barn to where I was doing chores, whinnying frantically. And it was clear she wanted me to follow her. I mean, this is like something out of a TV show. Follow me, Lynn. You've got to come. Something's really, really wrong. And, I had, and so I talked to my grandson. I said, "You need to tell Brandy you're okay." And he talked to her, but she was not satisfied until he got up, walked into the paddock, and gave her a big hug. Then she was like, "Boy, I thought something was really wrong there."
Right. No, that's a what a great story. What a great horse. Yeah, my Rita, the mare I was talking about that was anxious, who, day by day we're getting better, has, body things that she does that if the wrong person was around her would misinterpret. Because I've discovered that because first we started working through the fence when it came to handling her body and parts of her body. It was through the fence for her safety and mine, because she was so reactive. She would whip her rear end around and threaten to kick. There was always this threat that I'm going to kick you. And so instead of disciplining her, punishing her for a natural instinct when she was worried, I would just work through the fence instead and let her, on her own terms, let me touch her and handle her. Well, I discovered she loves to have her butt scratched. I mean, that sounds awful, but she loves and her butt by her tail and her thighs and her scratch. It's just like heaven. And so she learned that, wow, if you through the fence, you're scratching me. Now you can handle my back hooves through the fence, because her butt's right up against the fence, because she would rub on it and I go, oh, you want your butt scratched? So over time, she learned that's a great reward. And so now when I'm working with her, we're not using the fence, and I'm just, when I say, okay, we're going to just hang, we're just going to be here together, she will turn, whether she's on a halter or not, like I'm doing chores, or she will turn and put her butt to me, which is her language. Oh, please, let's play that game. This is my favorite. But if you didn't understand that where her ears, her eyes, her expression was soft, why she's turning her butt, if you didn't understand that, you'd be, get out of my space, blah, 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 it would change everything. So I am careful to be like, I'm deciding to do this. We're doing this together, instead of like, you can't just always, come and like knock me down or something. We don't allow that. Safety, like you talk about. But we have a relationship. And now for a long time, people will go like, well, why couldn't you just do it? But for a long time, she didn't want to give her back feet. And so how could we have the farrier trim her back feet if she didn't feel safe enough in our new, in her environment to pick up her back feet? So she's learned that scratch. I'm going to ask for your foot a little bit. Thank you. She gives a little bit. Go give her the foot back. Scratch. Can I have your foot, please? Pick up a little bit. Scratch. So it's like something pleasant happens when we pick up those back feet. And so now over time, I mean, we spent a lot of time rewarding, but she's learning that it's perfectly safe to give me those feet. And I've got a wonderful trainer I'm working with, a young gal that she was on my podcast, Tiffany Stauffer, who was a Liberty horse trainer. And so there's a lot of asking yes questions. And so Rita's learning that these are good yes questions, and that we're not going to pressure her to do something that frightens her, upsets her, makes her feel reactive and defensive. And so what your book has talked all about that. And that's where it started to like crack open for me, you and other trainers that I've been following, a whole paradigm of how to think about horses.
Thank you. Well, and working through the fence is a great idea, because it does give the horse the freedom to move away. And if you're not working through a fence, then you have to just be extra careful to watch the body language and not provoke the fear. And Brandy, of course, had some very big issues about having different body parts touched. And this is someplace where I think a lot of people go wrong. They first meet a horse and they want to like go in and touch the horse all over. And we've been told, there's trainers that say, well, the horse should allow you to touch. And if not, well, then we'll have them do laps in the round pen. And that's not earning trust. That's proving that you are not trustworthy, because you haven't really given the horse a choice. You've put him between a rock and a hard place. I either allow touching I'm not comfortable with, or I have to run laps. This is not a person I want to be anywhere near.
It sounds like a terrible first date, right? It's a terrible first date. Like I'm gonna grab you and touch you all over, like, excuse me.
So, so I did with Brandy the same thing you did, just a little bit different construct, because I wasn't working through a fence. I didn't sense any. I think I was able to read her body language well enough and she was very clear in her body language. So it's like, okay, you can touch my shoulders and my withers and a little bit of my back, but don't touch my ears. Don't go behind me. She had an absolute terror of somebody going behind her. And so we did butt scratching from the side. But I just worked to it, always looking at where's her anxiety level. And as soon as the anxiety went up, I backed off. And
Right.
the common wisdom is, oh, well, then you're rewarding her for getting anxious. You can't reward feelings. Feelings are what they are. You don't encourage the feeling by rewarding it. Um, what I was saying to her when she got anxious was, I see that you're anxious. I respect that. I'm not going to pressure you and scare you. And
Mm-hmm.
so after many of these incidents where she'd start to worry about something, I'd say, okay, we don't have to do that right now. Back off. We'll go back and scratch the butt or the withers or whatever, wherever you want scratched now. We're cool. I want to touch your hind legs, but okay, we can only go as far as your flank. That's all right. We'll come back to that another time. And that is
Right.
all telling the horse
Right.
this person is trustworthy.
And it takes time, right? I mean, it takes time. Like this doesn't happen in 2 days. I mean, unless your horse is shut down and is blocking out every experience, or so anxious that he appears shut down and then explodes.
Well, yes, and a lot of times when people think they've got a bomb-proof horse, what they've really got is a time bomb. That horse who has been shut down. So what they've done, what's happened is that you're no longer going to see the warning signs of anxiety. They've been told, don't show the warning signs of anxiety. Okay, so I'm going to hold it
Right.
in. I'm going to hold it in, and that's when they blow up. Um, and you can get there with food
Right.
too by
No.
accident. My husband's mare was very pushy about food, and it's funny. My vet said, "Well, try clicker training her," and I'm like, "What? That's it? How's that going to help with food?" But of course, it did because it taught her, "Oh, if I want food, I have to do something to get it." So she figured out for herself, if I stand at attention and I nick her, I'll get a treat. But I don't get a treat if I'm mugging
Mhm.
somebody or leaning over and trying to grab the food from them. So she learned to
Exactly.
stand still really, really
Yeah.
well. So the first time I was going to put a blanket on her, I gave her the signal to stand still. She's standing still, standing still. I'm getting the blanket out. And I didn't see until the last minute. I'm all ready to fling the blanket up over her shoulders. And I realized she is vibrating with tension, absolutely vibrating. And if I
Oh.
had thrown that blanket
Mm-hmm.
over her, I have no doubt she'd have exploded, and we'd have had 1,100 pounds going every which way, and I'd have been in the middle of it. When I saw that, I
Mm.
said, wait a minute, put the blanket back. I said, okay, Shiloh, let me explain to you what we're going to do here. And I folded the blanket, and then we went through a slow process. And 10 minutes later, the blanket was on. She was calm. And now you can fling a
Mm-hmm.
blanket anywhere. But you have to watch when a horse is starting to get
Yeah.
anxious. And if you miss those early signs and they blow up, that's not the horse's fault. That's our failure to watch the body
Oh
language and be
no.
forewarned.
Oh yeah. No. When I was sitting on that mare who I'd been working with, climbing on her bareback from the fence, she was trained. She'd been trained. The Arab mare that I got hurt on, she'd been trained and stuff like that, but it had been a while, and then she'd had some bad experiences. I was sitting on her bareback, and I said, "We can take a step. You can do this. You can take a step." And she stiffened and went, "Ugh." And I'd never been on a horse that bucked before. I didn't know that was a precursor to I'm going to buck. So having a serious accident really opens up your mind to being really aware of horse body language.
For me, the big revelation, I was about 15 or 16, and I realized that having a horse who is absolutely obedient is downright dangerous, because I was working with a horse who was a little rowdy, and I was really proud of myself. He listened to me perfectly. He did exactly everything I said every minute. And I gave him a faulty cue, and we landed on top of a jump, on top of a jump. And we landed in a heap, and I don't know how long I was unconscious because there was nobody else around. And that's when I realized I don't want a horse who always obeys me. I want a horse who thinks for himself. If he'd been thinking for himself, he'd have just said, "We're not doing that jump. I'm stopping." But instead, he obeyed. and it did not go well. So I've forever then appreciated a horse who thinks for himself and recognizes danger. And that's another thing you lose when you have a horse who is robotically obedient. They will do things that are dangerous because they've been so conditioned to do exactly what they're told, no matter what, whether it makes sense or not. So, actually, when I was working with Brandy,
Exactly.
and then trying to put together my book, and the focus of my book changed multiple times in the process. But by the time Brandy and I'd been working together for a while, I was able to characterize what actions do we take to help a horse feel safe with us and have them want to be with us and then become a partner we can really feel comfortable with and feel confident in. And I characterized 5 specific things that we can do. So I'd like to just sort of give you an overview of what those are. And the first one is what we've been talking about, is earning trust. Sure. And a huge piece of earning trust is respecting their personal space. You'll see people walk up to a horse and just like grab the lead line or the reins and expect the horse to walk with them, or grab the reins and stick their foot in the stirrup without even saying hello. And when I meet a new horse, I always introduce myself.
Right.
And I'm amazed how many people are shocked that I'm ignoring them and talking to their horse. Now, when you meet dog people, they expect you to introduce yourself to the dog, right? What dog person's insulting you? You introduce yourself to the dog first. But horse people aren't on with this yet. We need to introduce ourselves to a horse, and that means stop a little ways outside the horse's personal space. Because personal space is huge for horses. It matters amongst them. Like you said earlier, they can't gallop together in a herd if you aren't paying attention to personal space. So I always look for the personal space, and as I'm approaching the horse, I look for, does he turn an eye or an ear toward me to acknowledge my presence? If he hasn't, I pause. And if his body leans away from me, I stop. It's like when you approach people. You don't just walk up to a stranger and touch them. That's creepy. So why would you expect a horse to put up with that? Right. So the personal space is really huge. Right. And then, like we were talking about a few minutes ago, the touching. That's all personal space. There were some studies of people grooming horses and showing that there were a lot of dangerous behaviors because horses were saying, I'm not comfortable with this, please don't do that, and people were ignoring it in the interest of getting the horse clean and ready to tack up. So we need to pay more attention to how horses feel about us in their personal space and what we do there. The second we've also talked about is the clear body language. Make sure the horse understands exactly what you want so that your body language and your wishes are in line. I see this often in videos of people lunging a horse. They're saying one thing and their whip is presumably supposed to be telling the horse something, but their body language is saying something completely different. And then the horse is confused, so we up the ante and add more pressure, which makes the horse more confused. And then we have anxiety, and then we have the horse is thinking, I don't want to be near you. Just put me back in the pasture and go away. Always look at their emotional state. And horses have, all mammals have 7 core emotions. 4 of those are positive emotions. There's bonding and curiosity, play, and lust. Of course, lust is not one of the positive emotions we generally want to bring into our relationship and our training. But if we look at the bonding, which comes a lot from respecting their space, but a lot of people miss the curiosity and the play. Those are huge ways to engage horses. Curiosity is what I call investigative behavior, encouraging horses to be curious about things. One of the worst things people do with horses, especially with young ones, is those desensitizing programs where they want the horse to not react when the person brings some strange object toward them. And so now you've become the source of anxiety. Why should this horse trust you? So instead, if we use investigative behavior and engage the horse's curiosity, then we let the horse investigate the thing. So for instance, I'm riding down the trail and there's something weird on the trail in front of us. Do I use pressure to make my horse go past it and pretend it's not there? Then his view of me is, I see something I should be worried about, and Lynn is so clueless, she doesn't even know we ought to be paying attention to this thing. How do I trust her as a leader? So instead, we see something strange, we can stop and look at it. And generally, once my horse has looked at it for a while, he's going to go closer, and maybe he's going to decide it's really worrisome. If it's really, really bad, I might need to get off and walk up to it first, because after all, leaders go first, don't they? Yeah. Or at least good leaders go first. So, okay, Lynn, you prove to me that this thing's safe, and then we can go past it. In the ring, we can do even more than that. We can just put out all sorts of different things to let horses look at, play with, use their curiosity. And when you're associated with curiosity and discovery and fun things, that's bonding.
What's the third and fourth things that you were...
We use learning modes other than pressure and release, and ironically, other than positive reinforcement.
Okay.
Positive reinforcement can be great, but those are only two of the ways that horses learn. They also learn through social learning, like we talked about earlier, where the horse is copying what you're doing. They learn by copying other horses. And watch out, horses can be copying things you don't realize they're copying too. Brandy is a whiz at ducking under her stall guard. We can no longer use a stall guard at the front of her stall. We have to shut the door because she knows how to stick her head underneath and zip right out of the stall. And I suspect she learned that by watching me do it.
Sure. Oh yeah, growing up, my mentor at the farm said, "Don't crawl through the fence. The horses will crawl right through too."
I can just picture it, especially if you have ponies or agile small horses. Yeah. So social learning and investigative behavior are the third and fourth modes of learning that actually engage horses' intelligence. Because positive and negative reinforcement, we've decided what we want the horse to do, and we're providing reinforcement, either positive or negative, to get the horse to do what we've already decided they need to do. Investigative behavior is independent learning for the horse. He's using all of his different senses to, when he approaches, he sees something, he hears it, he smells it. Horses have an incredible sense of smell. They're actually being used for search and rescue. Because their sense of smell is so much better than ours, and actually,
it's like a dog's.
Yeah, pretty close to a dog. So this now becomes independent cognitive learning. So once I've let a horse investigate something new, it is never a source of fear again, because he's observed it, he's smelled it, seen it, listened to it, possibly touched and tasted it, and Brandy will go all in. Anything new, she's ready to check it out, because new things are no longer scary. New things are more like games. So that becomes an antidote to fear, as well as a learning mode. And because curiosity is one of the core emotions, learning through using their curiosity is intrinsically rewarding. And this is more powerful than any external reward, any treat that we could possibly give them.
Oh, yeah. Think of how a child learns. The same principle applies all of us, actually. Yeah. Okay. So that was the three things. Is there two more?
The last one, number 5, is protecting horses from unnecessary stress. And we can't protect them from all stress, so I make a distinction. Unnecessary stress is things like waving whips at them, chasing them around, any pressure that we put on them that doesn't need to be there. But life brings lots of stress. Things like vet visits, for instance, new situations. And So instead of trying to protect horses from these things, we want to teach them how to cope with them. Right. So that they're more resilient. The more time that we can help them spend in a positive emotional state, then the more resilient they are when bad things happen. So Brandy found that it was pretty safe being with me, and nice things happened. We did lots of investigative behavior. We went for walks. We played with things. But, the vet's going to come, the farrier's going to come, so is the chiropractor and the dentist. And we need to help them be ready for these events. So I played vet, I played farrier, I played chiropractor, short of doing anything that requires skill that I don't have. But I played with the body parts. I stood up on a hay bale next to Brandy or on a stool next to her so that I was over her back like the chiropractor does when she's making adjustments on the back. So I was able to get her accustomed to things like this over time with no pressure, no need to we have to get the job done because the vet's on a schedule. Yeah. So I prepared her to cope with these things. And I let them know by mimicking shots, which was a great idea I got from one of my vets, is mimicking shots, because Brandy was petrified. She choked one time and the vet told us what to give her an injection of, and we couldn't do it because she was too terrified. I thought, well, this isn't good. So we worked with it, and now all of my horses know that after they've gotten a shot or after they've gotten blood drawn, there's going to be a big fat cookie reward.
All right. Well, this has been pretty interesting. Of course, we're all learning a lot from you. Now we're going to get to the part of the show that we call treat time and the questions. And so usually I have like cookies or something, but I didn't have time to bake. So I have these beautiful grapes that and if you were here, we'd be partaking. But anyway, so that's just kind of a nice break treat time. And then we're going to go right into the questions. Now I sent you an intake form, and on it was a series of questions. We copied this idea from Warwick Schiller, who, of course, you probably know, a horse trainer and podcaster,
yes,
and he actually copied the idea from Tim Ferriss's book, Tribe of Mentors. So we just got to give credit. Okay, so I asked you to pick 5 of the questions of the 20 I sent, and so we'll start with the first one. What book would you recommend and why?
Well, I would, in all modesty, I'll recommend mine because as I looked around, as I said earlier, many people have the right philosophy of let's watch the horses' emotions and tune into those and make that an integral part of our training so that horses can feel safe with us, because that's what they really want. But I couldn't find any other books that explained how to do it. And that's why I felt this was something I needed to do, was to let me lay this out as clearly and succinctly as possible, with Brandy demonstrating in photos, Bronze doing some of the demonstrations, and that people could see most people can do this themselves, at least pieces of this everybody can do for themselves. And I think a lot of women in particular underestimate their own ability to work with their own horses because they get caught up in, well, this guy knows more than I do. He's got all this experience and I've just got this one horse. But mostly people read their own horses very well. And when you tune into your horse's feelings, most women are able to work with them a whole lot more than they think they can.
Oh, I agree. 100%. Okay, what is the most valuable thing that you put your time into that has changed the course of your life?
I was researching for the book. When I realized that Brandy was looking to me to help her and I didn't know what to do, I got busy. And in addition to that very lucky break I had seeing that young trainer working with the traumatized pony, I also used all of my equestrian background and all of my academic background to research what have other people done? What have they made work? and then how do we put it together and make it work for us regular people, not the people who are going to be in the Olympics or doing shows, but those of us who have our horses at home and we just want to have a good bond and feel safe and comfortable and enjoy the time that we spend with them.
I think that everybody wants that with their horse for sure.
Mm-hmm.
What is the worst advice given in your profession or a bad idea that you hear of in your field of expertise?
Be your horse's boss. Your horse wants to dominate you. You need to be dominant over your horse because otherwise your horse will take over. I really start to wonder if this doesn't come from people who are actually afraid of their horses because they're so adamant about never let the horse in your space. And you have to move the horse's feet. Well, no, if my horse is scared, I don't need to move her feet. I need to let her calm down first. And
Exactly.
yes, my horse is always welcome in my space if she's gentle. And this is something horses totally understand.
Mm-hmm.
In a horse group, you can go into somebody else's space if you're polite about it.
Right.
And my horses totally get this. They're always welcome in my space because they know they need to be gentle, but they also know that when I go into their space, I'm going to be gentle.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. What inspires and motivates you to do what you do, and what is your true purpose in the world?
I love to help people figure out for themselves how to be independent and work better with their horses. I'm not looking to have a big following. I don't want to be anybody's guru. So many people really have the right mindset, the right heart to work well with their horses, and I want to give them the tools to be able to do it independently, and so that they can feel more confident and be safer and happier with their horses.
For sure. Okay. The last question. What did you want to be as a child, and how close did you get to that dream?
I wanted to be a horse psychologist.
Oh,
And I thought to myself as a kid, well, there is no such thing, so I guess I have to do something else. And I'm not coordinated enough to be a great rider or trainer, so I guess I have to go to college instead. Um, but it all fit together in the end. Everything that I learned academically relates to horses. And I guess in a way I am a horse psychologist in that the thing that I'm most fascinated with is how horses think and feel. And that's where I've been putting a lot of my studying now, is taking some of Carolina Westland's courses, because she is absolutely brilliant at explaining animal emotions.
well, then, like I said, we and our horses are lucky that you chose this path. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I'm going to hold up your book one more time because I'm so excited about this. Where can people find this book? Where can they get in touch with you? I mean, we will include all these links on the show notes and things like that. But if you want to share with us, how do we learn more about what you're doing and how to find your book?
But you can find my book at Trafalgar Square Books, which is my publisher, and also on Amazon. And in UK and New Zealand and Australia, there's other publishers. I've got all of the links on my website, and it's been translated into Polish. And so there's also a Polish publisher, and I've got all those links. So you can find more about me on my website. I've got lots of articles and blogs, um, and I post regularly on Facebook, and I usually pose questions on Facebook, and I have a very active group of people who respond with lots of insight.
Oh yeah, I'm quite sure that's how I found you. It was on Facebook because I follow you, and it's always thought provoking, interesting, worth the read.
Thank you. That's my goal, and there's so many people who've had varied experiences and are very insightful, and so when I post the articles and blogs on my website, I often include what I've learned from people as as they respond to my questions on Facebook.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. Well, this has been a great experience. I just like makes me want to go work with my horses right now because I want to try some of the things I'm learning. We're all very grateful for you, Lynn, for coming on our show. And like I said, we'll have all the information on the on our website that connects to all your stuff. And thank you again for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me, Barbara. It's been my pleasure.